All right.
We gotta test this.
I think I'm good. Great.
Hey y'all. So today I am here with the Dr. Campbell. If you guys haven't followed me for a while, you won't know, but Dr. Campbell was my graduate school advisor and probably one of the best mentors I've ever had, just in a variety of areas. Really excited to be back here today. Occasionally we'll come and chat and hang out, go to the lab, just, we just always have like crazy conversations about stuff. So I figured that it would be awesome to get your opinion on the topics that we're gonna talk about today, just because as you guys know, I really like to focus on science-based stuff, and who better to ask than Dr. Campbell. So brief little intro, give yourself a little introduction, because I'm super bad at these, so.
Sure. Well, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
This has been a great rekindling. Lauren was a student here for 2 years.
Yeah.
And occasionally finds herself worthy enough to stop back and visit me. And while you were here, we did one of what I would say the landmark study on flexible dieting, which I'm sure you and your followers have already, you've talked about that. We're going to talk about some of the other research that we've done when Lauren was here, and what we're going to do with refeeds. But yeah, so I'm a professor of exercise science at the University of South Florida. I direct the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory, and I love what I do. And I'm excited. I was just telling Lauren, this is my first video on YouTube. This is it. So
First one.
So since that's
we
the
wanted
case,
to make sure we could do this.
Yes, yeah, I'm big on this with one of my stories. Let me say how much I love my wife. I'm sure she will watch this. I have the best wife in the world. And
does Joe really watch his videos? That's awesome.
I don't know. Well, I think she'll watch this one.
Yay!
I told her you were coming today.
His wife is awesome. Your kids are so cute. Oh my gosh, they came to one of my shows one time. They were adorable.
Yeah, that was fun. that was neat. So, we're going to talk science?
Yeah. Every study isn't perfect, and there's a multitude of reasons, but, funding, space, time, subjects, what you can actually do. So I kind of wanted to dive into the restrictions, really, of research. I think that's kind of, why every study isn't perfect and what these restrictions that we have are. All right, so the first one I think that we should talk about is funding. That is a huge indicator of what you're actually going to be able to do. So would you agree that that's one of the main...
That is, yeah, you could say everything.
Yeah. And funding is everything.
It is. The kind of studies that you like, that I like, probably that most of you like, are not fundable studies. It's most of the funding is for very important things like disease states.
Yeah, like if you actually have cancer.
Yeah, if you're trying to cure cancer.
Yeah, stuff like that. That's where a lot of the money goes, understandably. And so when people ask about a bodybuilding study or something, and it's like, okay, well, you have to really think about it. Like, we got 20 people who are into bodybuilding. It's kind of hard to fund that. There are, of course, situations where you can do that. But generally speaking, the equipment needed for really sophisticated research takes time to either build up, kind of how we've built up our lab over the past few years. We have, since I got here and since I've left, we've added so many cool things to both parts of the lab.
Yes.
The testing and also like the training area, but that just takes time to build up, unless, most of the time you're not getting like 100K plus just dumped into a study, or we're not in the line of research that everyone here is interested in. So that would be probably the number one thing I would say.
Do you have money to fund the study?
Yeah.
And where would that money go? Well, I can tell you it doesn't go to me. It doesn't go to the person directing the study.
Definitely not.
You have to buy ultrasound gel if you're using ultrasound. Yeah. You have to buy supplements if it's a supplement study.
Blood.
Yes, blood analyses. We were just talking.
Yeah.
One single blood analysis for amino acids is anywhere from $150 to $250. That's for one blood sample to test like 18 different amino acids. Other things, sometimes you want to pay subjects. So if you, like all of our studies, we supervise the workouts in our lab. I don't always pay my research staff, but that's something that I like to do. So if I get funding, I like to give them a nominal amount. So funding is huge. And then obviously the equipment. An ultrasound unit, a cheap one's $2,000.
Yeah.
A DEXA is $75,000.
Yeah, so you're not just gonna get that out of thin air. And for us, we've just kind of slowly built it up over the years, adding a little money here and there, which has been awesome. And now we have a almost full, I would say, lab of cool shit we can do. But, stuff just costs money. So that's definitely the number one thing to think about, y'all, when it comes to research design. So the next thing that is as equally important as funding, I would say, is probably getting it reviewed by the IRB and actually being approved to do the study. So you can have all these fancy ideas that you want to do, and then you have to submit it to the IRB, Institutional Review Board,
Board. Yep.
the IRB, and they have to go through it and make sure that it is compliant and you're not hurting people, understandably. If you think back to in the earlier years when they would do really bad research and hurt people. So you can't do that anymore, clearly, but it has to go through this IRB, and it's a very, very stringent process. We ran through a lot of issues with ours, and so that can totally shut a study down, right?
Yes, it can.
100%.
If I can add to that, if let's say you get a funded study, the group that's giving you the money, they may have suggestions about how you conduct your study. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't, at when you submit your study idea to the IRB, there are 3 different levels of approval. You have a departmental level, you have an IRB staff, then you have the full IRB board. At any point in time, they could say, we don't think this is good for the subjects. And the IRB, the as you alluded to, their job is to protect the subjects, to make sure they're not being harmed. So many of us, we live in a dieting lifestyle, if you're a competitor. So what we think is normal, an IRB board might say, you can't reduce their calories to 1,300 for 4 weeks. That's too severe.
Yeah.
So you have give and take. So it's not just what you think is the best study idea. It's what you think and what an outside group agrees to.
People, yeah. So when people even for my study, which we can get to after, but we couldn't do the meal plan diet, couldn't be 600 calories of tilapia and asparagus every day for 12 weeks. That wouldn't have gotten approved. So and obviously nobody would have done it either, but there's just hurdles that you have to go through that people who haven't been in research will understand. So this is kind of why we're kind of shedding light on this.
Yes.
And it can literally shut your study down time-wise and just in general, nope, you can't do this.
And you made a good point. What you are willing to do, and probably many of you, you're like, oh, I would eat asparagus for science for 6 weeks. Many people won't.
Yeah.
Or they say they will until they're in the study.
Really, we find out on their record.
Yes, it's asparagus and M&Ms.
Yeah.
And that ruins the study. That ruins the study essentially, and you have to throw that person out of the study.
Yep. And then your small pool went even smaller. So the other part of this, I guess the third part, would really be space, time, subjects, recruiting. So when you read a study, I know for weight training, right? And you look at why did they do XYZ training program? Sometimes the space, that's all they had in their space.
Yes.
That's all they had time to do. That's all that the facility had. Everywhere is going to be different. Sometimes they can go to the big school gym. Other times they have a squat rack and, one machine. So it's really dependent on the space, how much time those people have, and really recruiting. All of this we can, again, picture perfect world. I want all these people who have competed in bikini for 2 years and they're this much body fat. You're just not going to find that. That's why case studies are great. But as far as full studies, you would say that probably recruiting for our industry is a little bit more challenging, right?
Yes. Yeah. To get people, and again, we're fortunate. We have a lab where we can actually supervise every workout.
Yeah, we have a great space.
Yes.
Some people don't.
And it's unique. There's not many setups like ours in the country. No. But
or they'll say we gave these people a workout routine, but then they never watched them work out.
Yes.
So that's always kind of sketchy too.
And you hope that they did the workouts, but you don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas here, we physically, we watch them, we sign them in, we give them their post-workout protein.
That's a huge pro that I don't really see a lot of other labs doing, honestly, besides ours. So even those are for traditional bodybuilding style workouts. It's not they're testing their 1 RM. This is every day. Okay, you're gonna go squat a little bit, do reverse hyper, normal bodybuilding type stuff. So it really kind of comes down to all those factors, space, time, recruiting.
What you have.
Yeah, what
facilities.
You have is another huge factor in creating this perfect study that may or may not exist. So when talking about this, we wanted to talk also about my study and kind of the drawbacks. Like, we created a design, we deliberated over the design. Deliberated? Is that a word? Why am I saying all these weird words today?
I like I don't like that word.
Yeah, okay.
It's not good.
Okay, we poured our heart and soul into my design, and we tried to make everything as perfect as possible. But of course, that wasn't,
Yes.
the case. So some of the drawbacks, like when we look back, we wish we would have done. I know, I really wish we wouldn't have paid for saliva samples for
leptin, yeah.
Because leptin does not work. And like we talked about earlier with the blood draw, that was $2,000 to get that analyzed, and it showed absolutely nothing. So that was frustrating. So things you live and learn, right? Just because cortisol works with saliva doesn't mean that leptin will. But again, we don't have blood drawing here. So we don't have the tools to do that. We don't have the space to do that. So we would have had to send people out, and we couldn't.
Yes, we didn't have that in our budget.
We couldn't afford that. Obviously, we put people on macros or a meal plan. In a really, really perfect study, we would have had enough money or funding to support food. Those are top of the line, probably NIH funded studies where they give food to people.
Yes, and they would have them live in a facility.
Yeah, that's in
and
the hospital, and they give you all the meals. That's cream of the crop, but usually those are for obese people who are sedentary. So again, kind of the crossover, right? You get one thing and trade it for the other.
Yes.
So in a perfect world, yeah, we would have fed the people all the meals, knew exactly what they did, but of course we didn't. We don't know what they're doing. They could have been totally lying to us. I don't think they were, but they could have been. And so those are just some of the drawbacks. What did you think was another drawback?
Well, let me just make one comment on the drawback of not having them live in a facility where they're watching everything. There's a drawback to that. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can guarantee that what they're eating is what they're eating. Mm-hmm. But how many people live in a hospital ward for 8 weeks, having people watch them eat every single macronutrient?
Yeah, no.
So our study design had what we call ecological validity, meaning that we were giving people food plans or macronutrients to follow in a real life situation. Mm-hmm. So there's positives and negatives regardless of what you choose. Yeah,
there's always going to be pros and cons, which is kind of the whole point of this video, is, you trade one thing for the other, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you always want to control everything. And if we would have had, what if the subjects would have been more trained, or if we had done this? And again, my study was really long, typically, those studies aren't as long as that. So it was 22 weeks plus with the baseline, but about 20 weeks. So we told people to keep on the same training routine. We simply didn't have the time to train all those people for 20 weeks. Would that have been better? Of course, because then we could have known that everyone was doing the same thing, but just from a time perspective and from a realistic standpoint, we don't have the time or the funding or the space to do that. So that's.
And do you remember one of the other things we discussed a lot of, and we deliberated a lot on, was I think we said, let's reduce everybody's caloric intake by 25%. Mm-hmm. And we're like, good, at least that's standard. Nobody will have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. But the problem we had was some people reducing their maintenance calories by 25% would put them underneath their basal metabolic rate. Mm-hmm. So when we're thinking, well, what would the IRB think about that? Or is that even good for their health? We said, well, we don't think it's good for their health. We don't want them drastically reducing their calories to that level. Yeah. And the IRB may not approve it. So we had to come up with adjustments.
We had 3 tiers.
Yes.
Which that was totally unexpected. We were 25%, perfect. Some people had the discrepancy with the RMR and the food logs. So some people's RMRs were higher than their food logs. So dropping the food log by 25% would have been drastically lower than their RMR. And then so we had basically we took we did 15% off their RMR if there was a discrepancy with the food log, and then the last tier, which only 2 people did, was if either of those were below 1,200 calories, we capped it there.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't take anyone below 1,200, and only 2 people came to that where their RMR and their reported intake, both of those other levels would have been too low, but that was it. So.
Yeah.
So that was unexpected, and we just had to kind of roll with it and make something work.
But there's an example of not everything is ideal.
Yep.
Everything's an adjustment. Even with research, when you set out to say, we're going to make everything standard,
when you're dealing with
not.
humans, that's not how it works. So hopefully that gave you guys some insight to research why we do things, why we don't do things. And yeah, overall, I think this would be cool for people who haven't done research to kind of understand when you're reading stuff, when you see like, oh, why didn't they do that? Now you know, okay, maybe they couldn't do that, or maybe they had to change some things.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and this is part 1 of 3.